Hello everyone, welcome back to another session by K21 Academy. Today our expert trainer will be talking about domain 2, that is design infrastructure solutions. So let's get into the video.
All right, proceeding further, guys. Design your infrastructure solutioning, and the weightage will be 25 to 30%. Now, guys, the most of the questions will be coming from the computational side. We're going to talk about application architecture, migration, and your network solutioning over here. Okay. So, design a compute solution. Now, I'm just going to recall, guys. Remember, we talked about VM. We compared VM skill set. Then we compared app service. Then we further talk about container images, Kubernetes, right? So this is your computational architecture that how you will be designing. In networking solution, we talked about the high availability and the networking components, that how those components are connected with each other, right? So just to give you an overview so that you can concentrate on the question logic. So you plan to move a web application name app1 from on-premises data center to Azure. So how you want to bring that application from on-premises data center to Azure? What you use? Just think about it. And app1 depends on a custom COM component that is installed on a host server. So there is a component which is installed over here, and you need to recommend a solution to host app1 in Azure, and the solution must meet the following requirement. Now these are very, very important because on the basis of the requirement, your choices can vary. Now see the requirement over here. App1 must be available to the user if an Azure data center becomes available. Now that is the first requirement. Another requirement, cost must be minimized. Okay, so this has to be cost effective. What should you include in the recommendation? Your choices are: in 2 Azure regions, deploy a load balancer and a web app. In 2 Azure regions, deploy a load balancer and your virtual machine scale set. And your option C is deploy a load balancer and a virtual machine scale set across 2 availability zone. Or your option D, in 2 Azure regions, deploy an Azure Traffic Manager profile and a web app over here. Now guys, think, you just have to be available to Azure data center level failure. This will take time to analyze. Guys, create an architecture, take a pen and paper, try to analyze the architecture and then come up with the answer. Guys, think from 2 requirements perspective. Not only about high availability, also you have to take care of the cost. Guys, how much a traffic manager cost? Just think from that perspective. Just open your pricing calculator and check how one traffic manager is going to cost. Okay. You want to keep 2 web application in 2 data centers. Let's see the answer, guys. Absolutely, guys. Your answer is C. Deploy a load balancer and a VM skill set across availability zone. Your availability zone will make sure that another instance should be running in case your data center fails, and your load balancer will not going to cost you that much in comparison to your traffic manager, guys. So always remember, the second option was also there, cost effective. Your traffic manager is a costly application and it helps us to be available at a regional level failure. So the ask is only the data center level failure, guys. That is the reason I was emphasizing on this. It's a data center level failure requirement. It is not asking that you to create a DR for cross region, right? So this is the ask. Work on the ask basis, guys, over here. We know that this solution will definitely going to meet the requirement, because you are not only available at a data center level failure, you will be available at a regional level failure. But guys, that is not an ask. Definitely in your business, you can provide that solution if your client ready to pay for that. But guys, if the client doesn't have a budget, you have to think from the cost perspective. It's a minimized cost requirement was there. First 2 was definitely not a choice, because those 2 are talking about 2 Azure regions over here, which is not the ask. Guys, I would like to show you this particular comparison architecture of your, let's say, load balancer. See guys, Azure Front Door is a global service, your Azure Traffic Manager is a global service, your application gateway and load balancer is a regional service over here. And what to use at what duration of time, keep this particular architecture handy, guys. There is a workflow diagram that what kind of a traffic you will be using for what particular service, if it is regional or global. Keep that handy, guys. Okay. Go through this particular document. It will be really helpful to pick the choices whenever you will be using for network distribution for choosing any particular service over here. Clear, guys? You can see the architecture over here. Yeah. Not region. Yeah, it was a tricky question, guys, but you have to stick with the requirement. Yeah, whenever such kind of the question coming over here. Now, guys, another question. You need to design a solution that will execute your custom C# code in response to an event routed to your event grid. Now, Azure solution must meet the requirement. Now, guys, recall that discussion on the event grid part, your serverless, where we talked about your event grid, we talked about service bus, we talked about Azure functions, we talked about logic app, right? So these were event driven services that we utilize, right? So currently we are using event grid over here, and we want that on particular event C# code needs to be executed. Now, what is the serverless service which help us to execute a code on a basis of an event, right? Now, what will be your answers? So the executed code must be able to access your private IP address of Microsoft SQL server instance that runs on your Azure virtual machine. Okay. So the requirement is where is that particular code is going to execute, right? That particular code, whatever it will be executing, must have the access to the private IP. So what is that private IP? Private IP of a virtual machine on which the database has been installed over here. Your choices are on the basis of your cost must be minimized. So you have to think from the cost perspective as well. What should you include in the solution? Azure Logic App in the consumption plan, Azure Functions in the premium plan, Azure Function in consumption plan over here, and Azure Logic App in the integrated service environment. I hope, guys, I have already answered your question. Initially by providing that particular hint. So I believe everybody should be able to reach to the answer. Okay. Now let's see, guys, over here. The answer is B. Now most of you have selected C. What part you have missed? Now go back to the question and please let me know, guys. Let me tell you, guys, you all have emphasized on the cost. Guys, always remember, if you are going with Azure function in the consumption based plan, this particular service is not allowing you to accessibility of the private IP. So what Microsoft is checking with this particular question, whether you have tried enabling it or not, or whether you have created your functions, right? So yeah, definitely, guys, from the cost perspective, the answer is C, no doubt about it. But if they would have not included private IP part, if a private IP address is available, guys, always remember consumption based doesn't have the option. Let me show you, guys. You cannot integrate using the network. I'll create both the function. I'll create a function for, let's say, consumption based plan with a C#, and let's say you will be creating a function based application with a premium as well, right? Whether you would like to communicate through the private IP. So here you required an app service plan. Now, if the option is also the app service plan, that would have been the answer, but that option was not there. See, guys, let's say I'm creating any XYZ function over here. Give any name. My test for new F1, right? This is the name I have given. And this you have included for the C# code. Let's say, for an example, I'm going for Node.js over here, including East US. Now, guys, these are the options that you have, right? Let's say, guys, if function premium is not there, if app service plan was there in the option, the answer would have app service plan, because function premium is costly. But app service plan was not there and function premium was there, and that is the reason function premium is the answer. Because app service plan and function premium both allows you to communicate over the private IP, but this option was never included over there out of the options, and that is the reason this is the answer. Now, what is the difference? Let me create a consumption based. In consumption based, you will not get an option to interact with the IP section because you don't have a control on the app service plan. So whenever you will be selecting the app service plan, right, only then you will be reserving the compute. Consumption based will not allow you to reserve the compute. So if you're not reserving something, how you are communicating over the private IP? It is the public IP that you are communicating, because this is a PaaS service. So if you create a function with a premium or with the app service plan, you will get a choice for the networking requirement. Let's say this is F2. Okay, so the difference between the function app service plan and the premium is that premium will keep you pre-warmed instances available, Gary. So if you can recall the discussion, we talked about your durable function where it helps you, triggering multiple function, let's say function chaining. We talked about, let's say monitoring function. We talked about fan out, fan in function, right? So over here, when you use app service plan, it will be just like your web application, right? That we have an app service plan. Premium function for the business critical functions where you cannot avoid any sort of the failure. And if you require a scale, it will be able to scale. So remember that example that I gave you, that if you are a VIP person, your driver should be available in the car and ready with that car start. So you can just sit and go, right? And that is your business critical kind of a function, that there will be pre-warmed instances available, always ready to execute the code. So it will be waiting for you. So your premium function will always have a pre-warmed instances running. And meanwhile, this premium function is getting created. Let me show you that particular article as well that I have shown you during the discussion as well. Azure function docs. See guys over here. The difference between the premium and the Azure function. Okay. Hosting plans. See the difference over here. The premium function automatically scale on demand using the pre-warmed workers, which runs application with no delay after being idle over here. And your app service plan is just like your dedicated plan. So this is the big difference, that it will always have a pre-warmed instances running. Yeah. So for the long running functions, you will be using for that. Okay, guys. Meanwhile, your functions are also ready. So let's see what was the difference. What part you have missed? See, guys, if I go inside my F1 function, which were consumption based that I have selected, I don't even have a choice to use the networking component. See, guys, if I'll be using the networking option over here, I'm going into the classic function. It doesn't give you a choice of networking. Now, in the contradiction, see the comparison of the networking setting, guys. There is no such choice option available for using your networking setting, right? I'm going back to the function. I'm going to open the networking portal over here. It will give you the choice to allow the interaction on a private IP. So that particular option is available. Going in F2. See guys over here. Now you have the option to interact with your internet, right? With your VNet over here. So you can add this particular network, right? And you can select that particular private IP over here. But that is not a choice available here. That is a big difference. Are we able to follow? See, compare guys over here. VNet and hybrid, private network endpoint connectivity option and the hybrid connection. These three choices you will be getting in the premium only. You are just getting Azure front door and the CDN choices in the functions, as you can see over here. I hope the idea is clear, guys. Why premium? All right, guys, coming back to the questions. Logic app could have been the answer if C# code part is not been included. Okay. So if the demand is not C# code, is just the demand to just meet the requirement, could have been the logic app can be a choice as well. That question we have discussed, logic app part. Okay, so your code going to be on the basis of the driven, and there will be a function, and with the private network, it will be a premium function that we have just seen. Again, guys, you can go for this module, this kind of a questions. You can go for the module 3 in your Cloud K21 Academy portal, and there will be a practice test, guys, that you can appear for that. Now, further, we're going to talk about design and application architecture. Now, in the application architecture, here is the question, guys. Now, you have to think from the application architecture perspective if you will be creating a web application. Now, that web application can be in your app service plan or can be a Kubernetes cluster. So you are designing a microservice architecture that will be hosted in your Azure Kubernetes service, that is AKS cluster. An app that will consume the microservices will be hosted on your Azure virtual machine. So your Azure virtual machine and the AKS cluster will reside on the same virtual network. So guys, here your application which is running over here, you have to design that application that you are using on top of your VM. So you are designing a microservice architecture that will be hosted in your Azure Kubernetes service. An app that will consume the microservice will be hosted on your Azure virtual machine, and your Azure virtual machine and your AKS cluster will be residing in the same network. So both are there in the same network itself. So you need to design the solution to expose the microservices to the customer apps, and the solution must meet the following requirement. Now here are the requirements, guys. That your ingress, that is your incoming access to your microservices, must be restricted to a single private IP address protected by using mutual TLS authentication over here. So we talked about TLS authentication, about which particular service, guys? Just try to recall, guys. I'm not going to give multiple hints now. So the number of the incoming microservices call must be rate limited over here. Cost must be optimized. What should you include in the solution over here? Your application gateway with your Azure web application firewall that you would like to include, or you would like to include your Azure API management standard tier with a service endpoint over here, or whether you would like to use Azure front door and your Azure web application with your WAF functionality, or whether you would like to bring your Azure API management premium tier with your Azure virtual network connection. Think, guys, your cost must be optimized, guys. Keep an eye on that, because if you're bringing, okay, guys, I'm not going to give multiple hints over here. Everyone, guys, is it B or D? What do you think, guys? Or it is A or C? Let's see the answer, guys. The answer is D. API management premium tier with your Azure virtual network. Guys, always remember, whenever you are dealing with the private IP, right, you are trying to control the traffic through your private endpoint connectivity. Now, guys, always remember the private endpoints option you will always get in the premium tier. Similarly, in your Azure functions as well, right, you got that particular choice in your Azure premium service. In your app service plan, the private endpoint connectivity option will not be there. It will by default be there with the service endpoint. So over here, they are emphasizing on the private, guys. Don't miss this particular option. This is a big game changer. If this would have been not included, B was the absolutely correct answer. But they are emphasizing on the private IP address protected by the TLS mutual TLS authentication over here. So this is the point where we are missing on, guys. In last two questions, if you see Azure function as well, everybody have answered C because consumption based was cost effective. But guys, don't miss this requirement of the private IP. If there will be a private IP requirement, it has to be a premium tier. So one of the option to deploy your API management inside your cluster VNet of the AKS that consume microservice might reside within the same VNet, and hence there is no reason to expose the cluster publicly as an API traffic. Right, so by default your Kubernetes cluster will also have a public IP until and unless you would like to select for the private IP cluster, and if you want to communicate over the private IP, it has to be the premium. Make sense to all, guys? Everybody have a correct logic, but guys, don't miss on the private IP part. Okay, guys, coming on further question over here. Now see the requirement. You are deploying a sales application over here. So you are deploying a sales application that will contain several Azure cloud service, and you handle different components of a transaction. Now, different cloud service will process customer order, billing, payment, inventory, and shipping. Now, guys, these are the categories that you have inside your application. That, let's say if you are developing an application, so you would have these categories, right? And this is a sales application. Let's say if you want to purchase an item. So think from that perspective. We all have ordered, groceries during this pandemic situation, right? On the app itself. Now think from that perspective that you have an app and you are going to order an item using that. Okay. So you need to recommend a solution to enable your cloud services to synchronously communicate transaction and information by using your XML messages. Now, guys, your messaging service coming into the picture over here. Now, what should you include in the recommendation? Your Azure Service Fabric, Azure Data Lake, Azure Service Bus, and your Traffic Manager. So, guys, half of the hints I have already given. So, probably an easy choice to guess the answer now. Or if you already have implemented these kind of the communication mechanism, what you will choose? Think, guys. A is your Azure Service Fabric, which is a service like your Kubernetes, but it is a Microsoft base for the .NET based application, right? So Azure Service Fabric cannot be the answer because the requirement is to communicate using messages over here. Your Kubernetes will help you creating the cluster to meet your computational demand, right? That you would like to deal with the microservices for the .NET. Azure Data Lake is nothing but a storage service which keeps the data in a hierarchical namespaces. For an example, if you are transforming the data and you have some data available, so in order to transform the data, we do data lake. Azure Service Bus will have the queue where you will have the messaging services available, and Azure Traffic Manager is a service which help us to distribute the traffic cross region over here. The demand is for the XML service. Guys, this question was cherry pick, that if you are aware about that service bus deal with the messages straight away, that is the answer. Okay, let's see the explanation. Azure Service Bus, see guys, that will be a queue, that there will be a user which will be, the request will be coming in through the storage queue to your service bus over here. Service Fabric, guys, it's just like your Kubernetes cluster. Let me show you. Not very popular service. There are some options you will find absolutely the topic, guys. I mean, if you have used, messaging option, you will not even look into that. Let's say if you're creating your Service Fabric, it is just Windows based Kubernetes cluster, the way you will be able to create. This is for meeting your microservices requirement for .NET based application. So the Windows Hello, your Xbox games are designed in this particular cluster for working fast over here. This is your Service Fabric. Just like your Kubernetes cluster, there will be a master node that you will be creating, and then there will be a cluster node associated with it. So Service Fabric is not a choice. There is no messaging over here that you will be using. All right, guys, coming back. Now, guys, for this, you can just target your module 8. You can have a discussion on that. You can have a practice paper on the Cloud K21 Academy portal, guys. So once you are done with the demos, go and attempt that particular paper as well. Now, for the sample question, guys, now this sample question is about designing the migration. Now, think, guys, migration we have discussed last week itself, right? So it will be fresh for everybody. The company has 300 virtual machine hosted in VMware environment, and your virtual machine vary in the size and have various utilization and the levels over here, right? So you plan to move all your virtual machine in Azure, and you need to recommend how many and what size of a virtual machine will be required to move the current workload to Azure. So the solution must have minimized the administrative cost. What should you use to make recommendations over here? Azure pricing calculator, Azure advisor, Azure migrate, or cost management. Guys, this is easy. We have used that particular service, guys, last week. Azure Advisor is going to give you the recommendation for any resource, not specific to the migration, guys. Think, guys, we have used that service during the migration. Yeah, where it was giving you the option to select the third-party tools as well, right? So this was easy, guys. Azure Migrate. Once you create a project, and if you want to download your collector appliance, it will give you the option whether you would like to use Azure Migrate or any sort of the third-party tool that you would like to use over here. So this was pretty simple, guys. It was straightforward. There is not much logic that needs to be given. If you have used that service, you are already aware about the answer. Okay. Anyways, guys, coming back here, another question is, let's say you have a database. Now in front of you right now, there are four databases available: DB1, DB2, DB3, DB4. DB1 have a size of 400 GB, DB2 have a size of 250 GB, and DB3 have a size of 300 GB, and DB4 50 GB over here. Now, your company has an application named App1 that uses data from on-premises to Microsoft SQL Server, and your database is shown in the following table, right? So your application will be using it. Now the question is, it is coming in the different order anyways. So the question is, guys, your App1 and the data are used to on the first day of the month. The data is not expected to grow more than 3% each year, right? So it will gradually increase over the span of time. Let's say this year the data is 100 GB. So next year it will be 103 GB, because it will increase on 3% each year over here. And the company rewrite app as an Azure app, web app, and your plans to migrate all the data to Azure. You need to migrate your data to Azure SQL database. So the solution must optimize the cost. Now, guys, if you can recall, we discussed about the databases in previous to previous section, right? Now in previous to previous section, we talked about that how you will be able to select the compute model of a database, right? So where it was giving you the option of general purpose, business critical, hyperscale, and then there is a model for DTU, that is database throughput unit, that you can have standard, premium, basic plans that you can select. And on the basis of that, you can decide the costing part. Now here they are talking about that you are running a particular databases on the on-premises and you are thinking to move them on the cloud once it will be applicable. So only 3% is going to be increased every year. So you have to keep that thing in the mind during the migration itself, and you have to pick your database for the migration, that if you are migrating your database from the on-premises to the cloud, either you will migrate that particular database like your VM inside which there will be a database, or it will be SQL database. So what you will be using, guys? DTU for the basic or standard, or business critical will be an expensive choice, so it will be minimizing the cost. So guys, C is not there. General purpose can be a choice, or your DTU standard or basic. Let's see the answer, guys. B. So most of you has the right answers over here. So over here, guys, this is your DTU model, that over the span of time you can check that how much it will be costing you, and this you can use for a scaling purpose. So always remember, guys, for cost optimization it will be DTU, that is database throughput unit, that you will be using for that. Okay, and gradually you will be able to increase. Guys, I hope this part is clear to all. Now, why it is not A, guys? The reason being, vCore model based for the general purpose, it is a legacy way. So here you have to reserve that particular compute right over here, and it will cost you approximately, guys, for 32 GB, it will cost you 27,000 USD on a monthly basis. Sorry, 27,000 INR on the monthly basis, not USD, INR. Now that will be an expensive choice, but DTU will give you cost optimization. And why not basic? Because, guys, basic will not give you the functionality of let's say backup for geo level, right? It will only have the same region level policies associated with it. So always it will be a standard choice that you will be making over here. So that is the reason it will be DTU based, supported database up to 1 terabyte over here. Now this is the hint, guys, that you have the ask up to 4 GB. So definitely basic will not be able to support that much of capacity over here. And that is the reason the answer is your B. I hope this makes sense to all. Are we able to follow this? Proceeding further, guys. And for databases question, this will be available in module 11. You can go to the module 11, you can do some demos, and you can appear for the quiz as well to get proficient on such kind of the questions, right? Now, this will be another domain, that is domain 2.4. Here, we will going to talk about designing the network. Now, in this particular sample question, you are designing an Azure App Service web app, and you plan to deploy a web app to your North Europe Azure region and West Europe Azure region, right? So you have two regions where you are deploying two web application over here, and you need to recommend a solution for the web app, that your solution must meet the following requirement. So users must always access the web app from the North Europe region unless the region fails. And the web application must be available to the user in a region is unavailable. So you need to create a DR. So both the side has to be active, and one will only go to the another region if your primary region goes down. So that is the requirement. Deployment cost must be minimized over here. What should you include in the recommendation? Azure Traffic Manager profile, Azure Application Gateway, Azure Load Balancer, or a cookie-based affinity? Guys, this is a very easy question. I hope you will be able to answer that. So your capability of the global region will be either your Azure Front Door or a Traffic Manager or CDN services, these three services, right? Now, if you see the choices, only one option have that capability, rest of them doesn't. Cookie-based affinity, you will get a choice in Azure Front Door, but that is only a setting. You will find the same setting in Application Gateway. So D is out of the picture because it is not telling about the service. This is just a feature. And you will find this feature in Application Gateway as well as in Azure Front Door. But it is not mentioned that what particular service it is. So D is out. C and B cannot be the choice because these are regional services. So only the A was the answer. Make sense? And your performance traffic routing, definitely, guys, this is the performance based routing. So that is the part that you can select, but this is required. So guys, let me give you a further information over here. In your Azure Traffic Manager, you will be using priority based routing, because in your Traffic Manager as well, there are 6 kind of the routing available. Here, as per the requirement, the demand is one will be on the highest priority and another will be only coming into the picture if A fails. So you will be using a traffic manager with priority based routing, though it is not mentioned. But if you will be getting any questions where you will find all the 4 or 5 answers, given like traffic manager, performance based routing, traffic manager, priority based routing, traffic manager, geo redundant or geo level routing, traffic manager, subnet level routing, or traffic manager with multi value, the answer will be traffic manager with the priority based routing. Make sense to all? Yeah. So these are the choices, guys, but F and G, they are routing method, they are not a service, right? So those are already out of the picture. We have further options over here. So traffic manager. Okay, guys, that was my bad, guys. These are multiple choice question, guys. There is not the one answer that you have to select, right? So it is included. What I was explaining over here, that F, A and F will meeting the requirement. But anyways, guys, I have explained that why A and F is the answer. Initially, we only, formulate. I have to just scroll it down over here to get more options over here. Guys, I hope this part is clear. Why A and F? So this explains this particular picture, that what will happen if you'll be using the priority based routing. If one goes down, another will come into the picture. Okay, guys, another sample question. A company is planned on deploying two Azure Kubernetes cluster to different Azure regions. So guys, there are two Kubernetes cluster in two different regions, and different application will be hosted on these clusters, and the application deployment must meet the following requirement over here. Now, what are the requirement, guys? It has to be ensured that your application remains available even if a single Kubernetes cluster fail. And it must be ensured that your connection traffic over the internet is encrypted by using SSL. And you should also need to configure SSL on each container instances over here. Which of the following would you use for your Azure services for these requirements? Azure Front Door, Azure Traffic Manager, Azure Load Balancer, or AKS Ingress Controller over here? Think, guys, this is a tricky question. So take your time, guys, because you have hints on both the paragraphs. The first hint is that your web application should be available in two different regions, right? So you have to pick a global service for that. And here you have to distribute that particular traffic. Yeah. AKS Ingress Controller will allow you to have the accessibility. Now think, guys, your Azure Front Door. Guys, see, why B? Guys, C cannot be an answer. Reason being, your load balancer is not a global service. C is out of picture, right? Because your Kubernetes cluster itself have an inbuilt standard load balancer. So you don't require to create an additional load balancer over here. C is out of the picture over here. C is not the answer. Now, B is also out of the picture. Reason being, your traffic manager doesn't allow SSL and TLS termination. Your traffic manager is just the DNS based load balancer, which allows you to reach to the destination on the basis of the DNS. Here you cannot configure any sort of the certificates over here, right? Now take an example of AKS Ingress Controller. If multiple region would not be in the picture, right, and it is only for one particular cluster that you have to allow, but here they are talking about it has to be in two different regions. So definitely there will be one global service will be there. Anything which is not the part of the global service is out of the picture. So C and D is out. B is out because B doesn't allow your SSL encryption certificate to be uploaded. That will only be the Azure Front Door. That is the reason the answer is your Azure Front Door service. Makes sense to all? So as I said, guys, this is a tricky question. So what do you have to size in the question? Okay, guys, that part we have discussed. Now another question. A company has deployed a web application onto your Azure virtual machine in two separate regions. Okay. Now here there are two web applications and these are available onto a machine in two separate regions, and they want to load balance their traffic at layer 7. Now guys, layer 7 load balancer, what is it? And also want to protect the web application from SQL injection. Now what you would like to bring, you can see over here, right? So there are two machine in the separate region over here, and you would like to be available and you would like to protect them from SQL injection attack. So which of the following feature would you use for this requirement? URL routing, packet analysis, endpoint monitoring, or web application firewall? Easy one, right? Wow functionality over here. Yeah. And guys, don't get confused with the option two different separate region, because guys, your application gateway is a regional service, right? So you end up deploying two application gateway, but here they are emphasizing on the SQL injection. One application gateway is not routing the traffic to two cross region over here. Always remember. So don't get confused with this, because I have seen people getting confused with this option, two separate region. So here there will be two different application gateway that you have to create over there, and you have to include wow functionality because you have to get for the SQL injection. So most of you have correct. Don't get confused with two different separate reason, because they might be putting a traffic manager and Azure front door and you would like to protect, right? So here you will be going with layer 7. So this is the hint. Load balancer traffic at layer 7. So automatically it will be in web traffic load balancer, that is your application gateway, and this functionality will be getting your job done over here. Provide centralized protection for your web application from your common exploit and the vulnerabilities over here. Yeah, guys, it was a trick. Yeah. Okay, guys. So over here, you can go for again for this particular module 4. You can visit there and you can attempt these questions as well, right? So you will have some sample questions.
So, guys, I hope you really liked our session. And if you have any kinds of doubts, you can please comment down below and our team will reach out to you. And do not forget to give us a thumbs up. And if you are really intrigued by the kind of terms used and you want to learn more about it, then we have something really, really special for you. We have this free class on Microsoft Azure Solutions Architect certification, that is AZ-305. And if you want to learn more about it, then you just have to log on to k21academy.com /Azure SA02. In this session, in this free class, you'll be learning about why you should be learning Azure Cloud, your paths to learn Azure Solution Architect Expert certification. You'll be getting to know the difference between AZ-303, AZ-304, AZ-305, and a lot many insightful things. So if you want to do this, then all you have to do is just log on to k21academy.com /Azure SA02. After that, you'll be seeing this kind of interface. Just click on book your free seat now and select your availability according to the event date mentioned. Add your name, add your phone number, add your email, and every detail will be converged to you via our mail. And after that, just proceed ahead. On the extreme right, you'll be seeing this kind of link. So just copy this link, save it to your calendars, and I will see you in the next class. Till then, take care and keep hustling.